Good day, Miss Gasalao here, and today we're going to talk about this week's topic, which is ions and their charges. Now, you must know by now already the difference between atoms and ions. Atoms doesn't have a charge, and usually it is in its neutral state, while the ions has a charge, whether it be positively or negatively charged. But the real question now is, how did atoms become ions? And how did they get their charge? You must be able to answer this already when you answered experiment 1, build an atom, in your learning packets. Let's try to process what happened there. In the first part, I asked you to build lithium atom using the simulator that I gave to you, and then answer the given questions afterwards. Lithium atom has a total of 3 protons and 3 electrons. Always remember that the amount of protons and electrons will always be the same if the atom is in its neutral state. Now, according to the octet rule, it is the tendency of atoms to prefer to have 8 electrons in the outermost shell because it makes the atom stable. Now, by observing the structure of lithium here, does lithium have a complete set of electrons in the outer shell? I don't think so, because as we see here, it only has 1 electron in the outermost shell. It still lacks 7 electrons to become complete. So we have 2 options here. We could either add 7 electrons in the outermost shell, or we could just simply remove the only electron so that it will now have a stable outermost shell. The only viable thing that we could do here is to remove the only 1 electron in the outermost shell so that this energy level right here will become our outermost shell and it will become stable. Now, when we remove the only 1 electron in the outermost shell, there will be a change in the atom's composition. So before, they have the same number of protons and electrons. Now it is a different case. So we still have 3 protons, but when we remove the only 1 electron, the electron count became 2. So it means that we have more positively charged particles in the atom than negatively charged, which makes lithium atom positively charged and has a charge of positive 1 since we have an excess positively charged particle. And we know already that positively charged ion is called a cation. So this makes lithium atom into a lithium atom. Are you still confused on how atoms became ions? Don't worry, we still have more examples. Let's now move on to the second part. Now I ask you to build an oxygen atom using the simulator and then answer the questions afterwards. So oxygen atom has a total of 8 protons and 8 electrons in its composition, and it is in neutral state. Now according to the octet rule, the outermost shell of the atom must have complete sets of electrons, which is 8. But in this case, oxygen only has 6 electrons in the outermost shell, so it is lacking 2 electrons. Now we have 2 things that we could do here. We could either remove all 6 electrons in the outermost shell, or we could just simply add 2 electrons to make it 8. Now the most viable thing that we could do is to add the missing 2 electrons. So by doing this, we're going to change the composition of the oxygen atom. So before, it has the same amount of protons and electrons in its system, which is 8. Now we have 8 protons and 10 electrons. So this means that there are more negatively charged particles in the oxygen atom, making it negatively charged. And it will now have a charge of -2 because it has 2 excess negatively charged particles. And we know already that we call a negatively charged ion as anion. So this makes oxygen atom into an oxide ion. So that is what we technically did on the experiment 1 on your learning packets. Now kindly look in this example here. We have here the atomical representation of an oxide ion and the neon atom. Neon atom is a noble gas, and they are especially unreactive to other elements because they already have a stable composition. As you can see here, they already have 8 electrons in its outermost shell, and they are originally like this even without adding or removing electrons. And then by looking at the oxide ion here, they have the same electron count with the neon atom, but they're not the same because proton still has a total of 8. Meanwhile, the neon atom has 10 protons and 10 electrons in its system. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that we make sure that the outermost shell of the atom has a complete set of electrons so that it will become stable like the neon atom and other noble gases. Let's try answering some examples. So we have here the model of magnesium atom. What I want you to do is to determine its charge and what type of ion it is. You're welcome to pause this video while answering the questions. Let's check your work. By observing the magnesium atom right here, you can see that it doesn't have a complete set of electrons in its outermost shell. So it only has 2 and it lacks 6 more electrons for it to become stable. So you can do 2 things here. You could either add 6 more electrons for it to become complete, or you could just simply remove the 2 electrons on the outermost shell, making this as the outermost shell, and it will become stable. So the most viable thing you can do here is to remove the 2 electrons so that it will now have a stable outermost shell. And when we did that, it will have a charge of +2 and it becomes a cation. So is your answer correct? Let's have one more example. For the next example, we have here the sulfur atom. Now what I want you to do is to identify its charge and what type of ion it is. You can pause this video while answering the questions. Let's check your work. The thing that you need to do here is to add 2 electrons so that the electrons in the outermost shell will be complete. Its charge will become -2 because it has excess 2 electrons, and it will be an anion. So it will change sulfur atom into a sulfide ion. Now always remember, ions are charged particles, atoms are not charged. When there are added electrons to the atom, it becomes negatively charged and becomes an ion. When there are removed electrons from the atom, it becomes positively charged and becomes a cation. The process of adding and removing electrons is the key process in chemical bonding, which you will learn next week. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to never stop learning. This is Miss Gasalao, and I'll see you in the next video.